At 60 years old, Keanu Reeves stands on a quiet hill overlooking a city that once cheered his every move, but the truth behind his calm eyes, the truth hidden beneath decades of silence, is far heavier, far more complicated, and far more heartbreaking than most people will ever understand. This is not the story of a movie star. This is not the story of an action hero. This is the slow, painful unraveling of a man who carried too much, lost too much, and spoke too little. The camera moves gently, almost lazily, across a stack of old film reels. Dust floats in the single beam of light coming from a window that seems too small for the room. The footage lingers longer than necessary on the reels, the shelves, the forgotten scripts, and then finally settles on a simple wooden chair. The chair is empty. A moment passes. Another moment passes. Nothing happens. Then, finally, the narrator returns. Narrator. Before Keanu Reeves became the man the world tried to understand, he was simply a boy trying to survive the quiet storms of his own existence. To understand the tragedy of his 60th year, we must return to the beginning, not because it is dramatic, but because it is painfully ordinary. Chapter 1. The childhood of motion and stillness. Keanu's childhood, in this fictional retelling, moves like an old documentary film where each scene flickers to many times before changing. His early life feels stretched, slow, and almost unnecessarily detailed. He sits in a classroom where the clock ticks loudly. The teacher speaks slowly, each word dropping like a pebble in water. Children chatter in the background, but the sound is muffled, as though the world has been wrapped in a thin sheet of plastic. Narrator. In those days, Keanu moved from city to city, not because he wanted to, not because he was adventurous, but because life insisted on rearranging itself around him before he had the chance to settle. His childhood was not exciting. It was not chaotic. It was simply drifting. He would pack his belongings into small boxes that were never fully unpacked. He would make friends he never expected to see again. He would ask questions that adults did not have the energy to answer. Nothing dramatic, nothing sensational, just a quiet boy in a world that refused to slow down for him. Chapter 2. Loneliness. With a quiet tone, loneliness didn't arrive all at once. It arrived slowly, exactly the way boring things tend to happen. Keanu, in this fictional narrative, sits on a park bench. Children play far away, but he doesn't join them. He watches a leaf fall, spiraling so slowly that the viewer begins to wonder if the leaf will ever reach the ground. Narrator. Loneliness is not a sudden event. It is a gradual erosion, a slow, invisible process that wears a person down over years, not minutes. At home, silence stretches long enough to feel like a character in the story. Dinners are quiet, mornings are quiet, nights are even quieter.
This silence becomes the foundation of his future tragedy, still unspoken, still years away. Chapter 3. The Unremarkable Rise. Many documentaries showed dramatic early success. This one does not. Keanu's journey into acting begins with long waits and uncomfortable chairs. Casting directors flip through pages without looking up. Audition rooms smell faintly of dust and old carpet. Narrator. His early years in acting were not filled with thrilling opportunities or dramatic breakthroughs. They were filled with waiting, a type of waiting that is dull, heavy, and nearly impossible to explain. He reads lines from scripts that are more boring than his own life. He stands in hallways where fluorescent lights buzz loudly overhead. He receives instructions that sound more like distant echoes than actual advice. Eventually, roles come, but not in the triumphant way stories usually portray. Roles come quietly, slowly, and with little fanfare. A line here, a moment there. Nothing memorable, but enough to keep him moving. Chapter 4. Fame arrives too slowly to notice. Fame does not burst into his life. It drips in like a faucet that cannot be fully turned off. People begin to recognize him, but only vaguely. Some say, "You look familiar." Others say, "Weren't you in that one thing?" No one remembers the title. No one remembers his character's name. The narrator's voice becomes slower, almost sleepy. Narrator. Fame, for Keanu was a gradual fog rolling in across the quiet landscape of his life. Not dramatic, not exciting, simply a slow change in the air. He walks down a street. A person looks at him for a little too long, then another, and another. Nothing extraordinary, nothing grand, just gradual awareness. Chapter 5. The burden that built over decades. By the time Keanu reaches his 60th year, this fictional story paints him as a man shaped by decades of unspoken grief, uncelebrated accomplishments, and unnoticed sacrifices. He sits alone in a dim apartment that looks the same year after year. A single lamp glows faintly. Old photos sit on shelves, but he never touches them. Narrator. His tragedy is not a single moment. Not a sudden loss, not a dramatic accident. His tragedy is the accumulation of years' small disappointments, quiet heartbreaks, forgotten friendships, fading relationships. All stacking slowly, gently, until the weight becomes unbearable. He looks out of a window that shows nothing but an empty street. Cars pass occasionally, but not often. The world continues indifferent to him. And for the first time, the narrator pauses long enough that the silence becomes uncomfortable. Narrator. At 60, the tragedy of Keanu Reeves is not the life he lived, but the quiet, heartbreaking emptiness that filled the spaces between all the moments he never spoke about. Chapter 6. The weight of unspoken memories. The room around Keanu is dim, not dramatically dim, but the kind of dimness that comes from a single bulb that is several years older than it should be. The light flickers not enough to be alarming, only enough to be mildly irritating. He sits at a small table. The table is plain. The surface is scratched, but the scratches are not meaningful. They don't symbolize anything. They're just scratches. A cup of tea sits in front of him. It isn't steaming. It isn't cold. It is simply there, existing without purpose. Narrator. In the quiet moments of life, memories rise to the surface not because they are important, but because silence leaves them no other place to hide. Keanu looks at the cup, not drinking, not touching it. The camera lingers on his face for too long. The viewer starts to wonder if the scene will ever change. It doesn't. Instead, the narrator continues in a low, slow, almost sleepy tone. Narrator. He remembers people who drifted into his life and drifted out again. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just drifted. Friends move away. Relationships fade. Phone calls get shorter. Text messages become less frequent. Then they stop. But none of this happens quickly. Everything happens over long stretches of time, so long that the changes barely feel like changes at all. More like slow rearrangements of air. Chapter 7. A career built out of silence. Keanu's movie sets are shown in a painfully slow montage. Cameras are adjusted. Lights are moved. Technicians whisper about cables and angles. There is no excitement, no energy, just the slow grind of everyday film production. Narrator. He worked. He worked quietly. He worked consistently. Not because he was ambitious, but because work became the only steady rhythm in a life made of unpredictable silences. On set, he speaks politely. He nods gently. He waits patiently for instructions. The camera captures him sitting in a chair during a break, staring at the ground while people walk around him. He doesn't look sad. He doesn't look tired. He simply looks still. The narrator returns with a painfully slow sentence. Narrator. Even his success felt quiet. Fans praised him, but usually from afar. Critics respected him, but without enthusiasm. Directors liked him, but in a way that felt muted. Nothing was over the top. Nothing was intense. Everything was quiet. Chapter 8. When nothing changes for too long. As Keanu entered his 50s in this fictional narrative, the world around him seemed to remain the same. Same routines, same work schedule, same calm voice, same empty apartment at night. The narrator speaks as if reading from a very old book. Narrator, routine can be comforting, but over time, routine can become a quiet cage. Keanu wakes up. He walks to the kitchen. He pours coffee. He stands by the window. The city outside isn't loud. It isn't calm. It simply exists. He goes to work. He returns home. The days blend into one another until they become indistinguishable. Nothing catastrophic happens. Nothing dramatic occurs. But the lack of change day after day becomes its own tragedy. A tragedy of stagnation. Chapter 9: A world that moves without him. The world evolves. New actors rise. New genres emerge. New audiences grow. And Keanu, in this fictional story, watches everything from a distance, not because he is forgotten, not because he is ignored, but because the world is simply moving, faster than he is willing to run. Narrator: he was never chasing fame. He was never chasing attention. But as time passed, fame stopped lingering around him in the quiet ways it once did. He scrolls through news articles about new stars. He watches trailers for movies he doesn't recognize. He listens to conversations that feel more modern than he is comfortable with. And somewhere in that subtle shift, a faint ache begins to grow. An ache that doesn't hurt, but feels like a slow, ongoing fading. Chapter 10: The Silent Decline. At 60 years old, Keanu is portrayed sitting in a small, quiet apartment. The same apartment, the same lamp, the same window. Nothing new has been added. Nothing has been taken away. Time has passed, but the room has not changed. Narrator: his tragedy is not a sudden event, not a single heartbreak, not one terrible moment. His tragedy is the accumulation of thousands of small moments that built up like layers of dust on forgotten furniture. He looks out the window again, this time longer. The street below is empty. The trees sway gently. Shadows move slowly across the pavement. The narrator lowers their voice even more. Narrator: at 60, the heartbreak of Keanu Reeves is not the pain he carries, but the quiet emptiness left behind by all the things he never said. The camera fades slowly, very slowly into darkness.